My name is Linda Moffat, and I warmly welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Martha's Vineyard. It's wonderful to see everyone here today. If we have any new or returning visitors seated in the chapel who would like to introduce themselves, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. Do we have anyone that's new or returning or would like to share a word? No? And for those of you who are on Zoom, we're glad you're with us as well. If anyone on Zoom would like to greet us, please unmute yourself or raise that virtual hand, and we will come to you as well. Is there anyone on Zoom? No? Well, again, welcome. And we will begin our service by centering ourselves and listening to the prelude graciously offered by Jeremy Berlin. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of holiness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us.
Good morning. My name is Liz Loucks, and I'm a member of the worship committee. I'd like to start with a brief land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are standing on the land of the Wampanoag or Wampanoag people and nation. The ancestors of the Wampanoag nation have lived on this island for at least 10,000 years. Although we commonly refer to the island as Martha's Vineyard, this island has a much older name, a Wampanoag name, Noepe. I'd like to introduce the responsive reading. These words of thanksgiving come to us from the native people known as the Haudenosaunee, also known as Iroquois or Six Nations, the Mohawk, Oneida, Cayuga, Odiga, Seneca, and Tuscarawas of upstate New York and Canada. The Thanksgiving address has roots dating back to 1,000 years to the formation of the Great Law of Peace by a man called the Peacemaker, and perhaps before that. Today, words similar to these are still spoken at the openings and closings of all ceremonial government gatherings held by the Six Nations. Robin Wall Kimmerer, author of the book Braiding Sweetgrass, was repeatedly told by Haudenosaunee people that the words of the Thanksgiving address were their gift to the world and meant to be shared. This address is also known as the words that come before all else, and is traditionally spoken to greet the day, start a meeting, or before starting negotiations with other nations. Orrin Lyons was a faith keeper with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy in Northeast North America, and when Kimmerer asked about sharing the Thanksgiving address in her book, he said, "Of course you should write about it. It's supposed to be shared. Otherwise, how can it work? We've been waiting for 500 years for people to listen. If they understood the Thanksgiving address then, we wouldn't be in this mess." So as we read it together, feel the gratitude in your heart for all the world around us that gives us so much and allows us to live. I'll now introduce Ed Pacheco, who is going to be leading us in the responsive reading.
Good morning. My name is Edward Pacheco. My great-grandfather, Jancipo Pacheco, came here in the mid-1800s, so we've been on the island for about 7 generations now. Not as long as the Mayhews, Nortons, or Tiltons. The Mayhews have been here for more than 20 generations, and yet we are all still damp as wash ashores compared to the Wampanoags who have been here for thousands of years. The Thanksgiving address, it's a responsive reading. Your job is to say, now our minds are one, basically. Today we have gathered and we look upon the faces around us. We see that the cycles of life continue. We've been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living beings. So now we bring our minds together as one as we give our greetings and our thanks to each other as people. We are thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. To our Mother we send thanksgiving, love, and respect. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst, providing us with strength and nurturing life for all beings. Water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans, snow and ice. We are grateful that the waters are still here and meeting their responsibility to bring life to all of creation. With one mind, we send our greetings and our thanks to the Spirit of water. We turn our minds to all of the fish life in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water. We are grateful that they continue to do their duties and that we can still find pure water. We send to the fish our greetings and our thanks. Now we turn toward the vast fields of plants. As far as the eye can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give our thanks and look forward to seeing plant life continue for many generations to come. With one mind, we turn to honor and thank all the food plants we harvest from the garden who feed us with such abundance. Since the beginning of time, the grains, vegetables, beans, and fruit have helped the people survive. Many other living beings draw strength from them as well. We gather together in our minds all the plant foods and send them our greetings and our thanks. Now we turn to all the medicine plants of the world. From the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness. They are always waiting and ready to heal us. We are happy that there are still among us those special few who remember how to use these plants for healing. With one mind, we send thanksgiving, love, and respect to the medicines and to the keepers of the medicines. We gather our minds together to send our greetings and our thanks to all the animal life in the world who walk about with us. They have many things to teach us as people. We are grateful that they continue to share their lives with us and pray that they will always be so. Let us put our minds together as one and send our thanks to the animals. We put our minds together as one and thank all the birds who move and fly about over our heads. The Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks. We give thanks to the stars who are spread across the sky like jewelry. We see them in the night, helping the moon to light the darkness and bringing dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they guide us home. With our minds gathered together as one, we send greetings and thanks to the stars. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. All of the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way.
We are now going to have a pledge testimonial by Yule Hopkins.
Good morning. I'm Yule Hopkins, and I'm very happy and honored to be able to share a little of my joy of this island community. The island of Nope, my happy place. As I enter Teesquam Valley Preserve off of Middle Road and walk to Wiscosam's Ridge and view the valley below and Cedar Tree Neck in the distance and the great expanse beyond, I find joy. When I travel to the plains of Lobsterville and view the undeveloped or underdeveloped ridge of Aquina, I find joy. My cathedral in the sky above Keith's Farm in Chilmark brings me joy when I visit. And when I enter Stephen's Chapel with all of you, I'm in my spiritual home. The place where my ancestors touch my soul the deepest and the closest than any other place on earth. We are a welcoming community. You are welcome here, your whole self, with all your truth and all your doubts, your hopes, your worries, your joys, and your concerns. We are an open-minded, caring, thinking, doers, coming together in community to make the meaning of our lives and to make the difference in the world. We are diverse in faith and background, but aligned in our belief in the worth and dignity of every person. Here, you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. That, to me, is value and truth. Thank you.
Before I read the sermon, I'm just going to give you a brief announcement that today at Felix Neck from 2 to 3:30, Sassafras Earth Education is holding its Indigenous People Day celebration. So I thought everyone would want to know about that. I am going to read a sermon, The Other Side of the Pond, written by the Reverend Dr. Jan Marie Carlsson-Bull. Reverend Carlsson-Bull grew up in Iowa and earned a bachelor's degree in philosophy from the University of Colorado in 1964. She went on to Union Theological Seminary in New York City and received a master's in divinity in 1969. Her first husband, Russell Fletcher, was also a student at Union Theological Society, but he died serving in Vietnam in 1968. Jen went on to earn a PhD in developmental psychology from the Furkhoff Graduate School of Psychology at Yeshiva University in New York City in 1986. She was ordained in 1999 and was a Unitarian minister for 22 years. She served the First Parish in Cohasset, Massachusetts from 2004 to 2010, and I believe she wrote this service in 2009 while she was a minister in Cohasset. She is now retired and lives with her husband, Dan Bull, in Connecticut, and they have 3 children and 3 grandchildren. I've made some small edits, and I'm leaving out a small section in the interest of time, but you can find the full sermon on our website, listed on the back of your, not our website, on the UUA website, listed on the back of our order of service. So reading Reverend's words. How clearly I remember it. My husband Dan, our daughter Sarah, and I had spent the night in Taos, New Mexico. The next morning, we set out for the Pueblo, an ancient village inhabited by indigenous people known as the Pueblo or Puebloans. Clearly tourists, easily identified as European Americans, we were welcomed. Dan, Sarah, and I were acquainted with, but by no means steeped in the history of our own ancestors' oppression of the Pueblo and millions of other indigenous people. We treaded lightly and slowly as we navigated the twists and turns of the village that was home to families whose lineage was tied to this mountainous site in what is now northeastern New Mexico, centuries before the prospect of gold was a gleam in the eye of any far-off explorer to the east. Toward what we thought was the conclusion of our visit, we entered the gift shop. Behind the counter were a young man and a young woman, both seemingly in their 20s. We exchanged pleasantries. We discussed the beauty of the wares for sale, and we then moved our conversation around a corner into the grist of the American Indian movement known as AIM, the unjust imprisonment of poet and AIM activist Leonard Peltier, and the continuing oppression of the Pueblo and other indigenous nations at the hands of power structures with a history. Then I can't remember who, the young man or the young woman, spoke of a nearby lake, a sacred site not recorded on any map. Nestled into the topography, not far from the Pueblo village, lies Blue Lake, Oral tradition holds that the people of the Taos Pueblo were created from its sacred waters. It is holy ground. Why is it not on any maps? We asked naively. It's the only way to protect it, came the reply. In the early 20th century, the U.S. government appropriated this sacred lake in its surrounding area. It was a site promising lucrative natural resources and tourism. Blue Lake became the focus of 64 years of legal contests, protest, appeals, and advocacy by the Pueblo and their allies. Before it was returned to the Pueblo in 1970. Was it a matter of property rights? No. It was an issue of religious freedom. Just a year before restoration, Pueblo elder Paul Bernal proclaimed at a congressional hearing, "We are probably the only citizens of the United States who are required to practice our religion under a permit from the government. This is not religious freedom as it is guaranteed by the Constitution." Of course, it's not on a map. Of course. The story haunts me. It is part of a history commonly invisible to most of us whose ancestors shaped this nation as we know it, but who were rarely beholden to this land and its indigenous stewards. Like many of you, I learned early on a pledge of allegiance that carried far more than the loyalty to one nation under God. I learned allegiance to the assumption that this nation was founded by my European forebears just a few centuries ago. I learned that Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. I learned that the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria were worthy of the most vivid hues in my box of crayons. I learned and memorized the really important dates: 1492, 1620, 1776, 1789. I didn't bother asking what my daughter Sarah often refers to as that vital second question. I didn't bother asking or wondering or doubting because I really didn't have to. Once a body of belief begins to crack, once what is held to be historic gospel begins to erode, once any of us become privy to another story, another history, another reality, we cling to the familiar one only out of a need to be reassured, only out of a penchant to take our cues from loved and respected teachers and preachers and parents and grandparents and touted authorities on this and that, because climbing into a boat guaranteed to rock is just way too scary. But conversations matter. Stories new to us but ancient to others matter. Histories written or recalled across generations from a different lineage matter. A religion that holds faith and doubt and a reverent balance matters as we consider in this chalice of religious community what happened and what didn't. A religion that holds faith and doubt and reverent balance and the search for truth in the highest esteem matters mightily as we ponder the formation of heroes and histories. When Christopher Columbus approached the islands of North America just over half a millennia ago, he and his shipmates were received with warmth and wonder. Arawak men and women swam out from the beaches of the Bahamas, curious about this strange large craft nearing their shores. As Columbus and his sailors reached land, the Arawaks welcomed them with food and gifts. Their hospitality was immediately evident to Columbus and his crew. Bartolomé de las Casas, a contemporary of Columbus and a Spanish priest, transcribed the explorer's journals. The Indians, observed Columbus, have large communal bell-shaped buildings housing up to 600 people at one time. They lack all manner of commerce, neither buying nor selling, and rely exclusively on their natural environment for maintenance. They are extremely generous with their possessions. With 50 men, calculated Columbus, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we wanted. Las Casas proceeded to document the large-scale ravage of the Arawaks in hundreds of Native American communities. Las Casas documented genocide. While Columbus's sojourn to the natural world has been hailed by Western European and European Americans as a pivotal discovery of uncharted terrain, The Arawaks and their counterparts across central North America discovered the seed of an emerging political state that has long vacillated between lifting and shifting yokes of oppression. While writings by and about Bartolomé de las Casas are available in abundance, the record of Las Casas reached me through the pages of Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. Zinn tells the story of Columbus's arrival from the viewpoint of the Arawaks, of the Constitution from the standpoint of the slaves, of Andrew Jackson as seen by the Cherokees, of the rise of industrialism as seen by the young women in the Lowell textile mills, the New Deal as seen by the blacks in Harlem. He presents the narrative of our nation through the voices that have been muted in the history books to which we have grown accustomed. And there are so many history books to which we have grown accustomed. Every year, as October 12th approaches, there is a certain sense of dread that can be felt by indigenous communities in the Americas, wrote Roseanne Dunbar Ortiz, a historian, writer, and co-founder of the Indigenous World Association, which lobbies the United Nations on behalf of indigenous peoples' rights. She continued, that Columbus Day is a federal holiday in the United States is regarded as hideous, a celebration of genocide and colonialization. However, beginning 30 years ago, now it'd be 47 years ago, indigenous peoples formed an international movement demanding that October 12th be commemorated as an International Day of Mourning for the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Informally, the day has been appropriated as Indigenous Peoples Day. This year, in 2007, she wrote that it feels different in indigenous communities as they celebrate the great victory of the adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People by the General Assembly of the United Nations on September 13th, 2007. This landmark declaration was the harvest of 3 decades of advocacy by indigenous peoples worldwide. While 144 nations voted in favor, 4 voted against: Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States. Why would this nation, rooted in the principles of justice for each and liberty for all, not affirm in 2007 a Declaration of Human Rights on behalf of its earliest residents of this land? America has a European history of violence that has been unaccounted for and even at times rigorously denied, writes George Tinker, also known as Tink Tinker, a professor of American Indian culture and religious traditions at Iliff School of Theology in Denver. Dr. Tinker is also an ordained Lutheran minister and director of the Four Winds American Survival Project in Denver. The context of Dr. Tinker's statement is an essay grounding a soul work forum. In early 2001, our Unitarian Universalist Association invited a number of ministers and scholars from liberal religious traditions for an intensive consultation on theology and anti-racism. The meeting site was our UU offices in Boston. The hardcore outcome of this volume is soul work in anti-racist theology and dialogue. Dr. Tinker's message is not easy to hear. When the first Europeans came to Americas, the Spanish to the Caribbean, the English to North America, they came with clearly preconceived notions of conquering indigenous peoples and theological and intellectual grounds for justifying and legitimizing their exercise of violence. In New England, the Puritans were the new Israel, self-righteously displacing the original Canaanites. The celebration of Columbus Day, Dr. Tinker declares, is an example of why addictions therapy would call denial. It is an active denial on the part of white Americans with respect to the history of violence that has been at the core of American colonial project. Self-righteousness and denial go hand in hand. Neither leaves room for humility. Neither leaves room for accountability. Guilt is an unproductive option, commonly fueling denial through attention to what we feel at the expense of what happened and what can we do about it. As people of faith, as citizens and residents of a nation that promises liberty and justice for all, what can we do about it? What can we do about the truths untold, about truths quickly told and all but discarded, about horrors committed by celebrated heroes, about a negative vote cast by this nation at the United Nations, a missed opportunity to begin to redeem our nation's history through affirming the rights of Indigenous people in this nation and throughout nations. What can we do? We can learn the truth in love. We can read historical accounts that tell the whole story. We can enter a dialogue with one another and extend this dialogue to neighboring congregations on anti-racism and human rights. We can heed the counsel that Dr. Tinker gives to his white students at ILIF. Take a step away from the center out towards the periphery and look back at the center again as something that's hurting you as a white American as much as it's hurting Indian people, Blacks, Hispanics, Latinos, and Asian Americans. We can join a growing movement that includes George Tinker, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, and the city of Berkeley, California, and our own Unitarian Universalist staff at 24 Farnsworth Street and observing Indigenous Peoples Day, a holiday in place of Columbus Day. I'm now going to do a little interjection just to update the sermon to 2024. The United States changed its stance on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People on December 16th, 2010, when President Obama announced the country's support for the declaration at the White House Tribal Nations Council. Currently in Massachusetts, more than 20 communities have replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day, yet the Commonwealth as a whole has not officially done so. There are 2 active bills in the current General Court of the Commonwealth: House Bill 2989 and Senate Bill 1976 that we can contact our representatives to support. You can visit the website indigenouspeoplesdaymass.org. It's a website with many links so you can write letters to your representatives. Right. End of interjection. Imagine you're a woman or a man in the gift shop of Taos Pueblo. A white family comes in and begins a conversation, asks some questions. With reticence, you tell the story of Blue Lake. They leave. You wonder, what is it that they hold sacred? What is it that they celebrate? To those of us whose ancestries is from other shores are newcomers. No matter that our ancestors go back to the 1600s, we are newcomers. We've barely arrived on the other side of the pond, and already we've forgotten why we set sail. Was it an escape from religious oppression? Was it a flight from famine? Was it a quest for gold to feed a hungry queen? Was it a crusade to appease a fragile god? In our arrival? What is it that we hold sacred? What is it that we celebrate? In the spirit of the late Alfred Ortega, 1,517 years of events took place that we cannot change. We cannot stand up like Las Casas to say this must stop. We cannot tell Tanos and the Arawak on first seeing the Spanish arrive to run, and not stop running. What was. We cannot change the number of days, nor can we change the events that happened. We can, though, choose to remember or forget, to celebrate, solemnize, recognize. May it be so. Amen. Please now join us and rise if you're willing and able and sing For All That Is Our Life. This is a hymn that we heard back during the pandemic. Reverend Rob used this song with recorded music, but this is the first time that we've had it played live in our church. So Jeremy will play it through once, and then we'll sing it together.
Our closing words by the Reverend Shari Woodbury, citizens of our communities, our nation, our world. Let us continue to grow as citizens of our communities, our nation, and our world. Let us work to build the common good for ourselves and the generations to come. May it be so. Amen.
Please remain seated for the postlude.